If you are interested in the human mind and the human experience, this episode is for you. Today I will be interviewing Dr. Jorge Cham and Dr. Dwayne Godwin, the authors of Out of Your Mind, The Biggest Mysteries of the Human Brain. Why do we love? Why do we hate? What makes us happy? Will AI take our jobs? What happens after death? These questions and more are explored by the authors. Dr. Jorge Cham is the Emmy-nominated and best-selling cartoonist, creator of the popular online comic strip Piled Higher and Deeper, also known as PhD Comics. He is a co-creator, executive producer, and the creative director of Eleanor Wonders Why, a highly rated kids show that's animated on PBS, and the author and co-author of several popular science books and the best-selling and award-winning We Have No Idea, A Guide to the Unknown Universe and Frequently Asked Questions About the Universe, as well as the children's book series, Oliver's Great Big Universe. Cham is also the co-host and creator of Daniel and Jorge Explain the Universe, a popular podcast and radio show, and he obtained his PhD in robotics from Stanford University and was an instructor and research associate at Caltech. And he is originally from Panama, and you can find out more about him in the show notes. And I do believe he also is hosting a podcast called Science Stuff, so check that out. I believe it's on iHeartRadio. Dr. Dwayne Godwin, a neuroscientist, an educator and academic leader who is a professor in the Department of Translational Neuroscience. That's right, the Department of Translational Neuroscience, and served as the graduate dean at the Wake Forest University School of Medicine in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His research centers on the cellular basis of abnormal brain rhythms, including active projects on calcium channel function, epilepsy, and traumatic brain injury. His goal is to use emerging insights about the brain to develop treatments and potential cures for neurological diseases. His science outreach includes Mind in Pictures, co-created with Jorge Cham, for the Scientific American Mind, as well as the blogs for the Society of Neuroscience and the Museum of the Moving Image. You can find both of their links in the show notes, as well as the link to buy or borrow the book from your local library, Out of Your Mind, The Biggest Mysteries of the Human Brain. All right, let's get to the interview. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Doctors Jorge Cham and Dwayne Godwin. I appreciate you both being on the show today.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as people will note, your book, Out of Your Mind, The Biggest Mysteries of the Human Brain, is out now. And it's not just a book, it's a comic. And it's not just a comic, it's a book to learn things from. And I have to say, I've been enjoying the book. Making my way through it has been actually quite easy, even though it is a longer book, so it could intimidate some people, around 300 and something pages. But it's been a fun ride and actually funny, and I've been learning things or relearning things, I guess, because this is sort of my field. Sometimes get caught up in the weeds, so I like how you started with a lot of the basics and then the building blocks and kind of went forward. And there's so much that we could get into, but I'm going to turn it over to you guys to kind of tell me a little bit about, people like to know why you guys got together to write the book. And I know that I already kind of know that, but I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about kind of how you guys decided to write this.
Sure. You want me to start this, Jorge, and then
you can
chime in? So every good comic story arc has an origin story. So our story was several years ago.
We both got bitten by radioactive spiders, is what happened.
Yeah, that's right. Not exactly that prosaic, but yeah, something similar. Where Jorge a few years ago was doing what I would term and what might be called these days sort of a wellness tour to local, to national colleges and also universities overseas, I believe. And it was, I believe it was called The Power of Procrastination. Was that the title of it, Jorge?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a wonderful talk because what it did was it really conveyed to graduate students, and I was an administrator who was hosting him at the time. It conveyed to students that some of those kind of weird things that they do as digressions are actually potentially very meaningful and help to, provide outlets for students for a very difficult time in their lives. Getting a degree in an advanced topic in graduate school can be very, very difficult and trying from a mental health perspective. And what Jorge's talk did was give students, some hope that there was life after the PhD. So, as part of me hosting him, we actually went into a local Subway shop that was actually close to where I work, and we started just sort of riffing on a common love of the comic art form and what it can bring to stories and how to create story arcs and that sort of thing. And based on that conversation, we posed a very simple question, which was, what would it be like if we took the most complicated organization of matter in the universe, at least according to Isaac Asimov, and we tried to storify that using a comic art form, which is often thought of as being not as sophisticated, but certainly it offered a lot of possibilities for being able to do things in terms of story arcs and revealing the hidden layers of the brain that other types of textual storytelling may not offer. And so from that, we went into an experimental mode where we just did a few comics. At the time, we were publishing those in the Stanford D School magazine called Ambidextrous, and we did that for a couple of years. And then we got a paid gig for Scientific American, and for several years in a magazine called Scientific American Mind, we generated comic stories, one-pagers, that described, various elements of how the brain works and the basics of neuroscience, memory and learning, and love, and brain-computer interfaces, things like that, were all included in that body of work. And we also, along the way, we actually won a national competition that was sponsored by the NSF. That's called the Vizzies, and we won that in the informational graphics category for a comic strip that we did on brain development. So from there, part of the challenge was, well, this is all nice, but it's just tiny little chunks, and it's not really telling the full story of the brain. And so that was really the origin point of thinking about a longer form that might include some additional text in addition to the comic art in order to tell a more fulsome story about how the brain works, but to retain that sort of approachable aspect of it and that basic curiosity that Jorge and I both feel about the brain.
Excellent. Jorge, what's your take? I know that there's two superheroes here working on this.
Yeah, I'm more of the Robin to Dwayne's Batman, really,
okay.
to be honest. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I've been a cartoonist for a long time online, drawing a comic strip called PhD Comics, kind of about life in academia, or the lack thereof in academia. And, at the time, I was just kind of interested in exploring what else I could do with comics. And so I had done a few comics kind of about science. But when I talked to Dwayne that time that I was visiting Wake Forest University, it really kind of clicked because, the brain is something that every human on the planet has. We all have it in our heads. We all use it. That's where each of our identities and everything that we are lies. And yet, not only does the everyday person know very little about how their brain works, science also has big gaps in what we know and understand about the brain. And so for this book, we really wanted to create something that was both kind of like a user's guide for someone to sort of understand how their brain works and why they make the decisions that they make on a daily basis. But we also kind of wanted to communicate, what does science know about the brain? And very importantly, how does science know what we know about the brain? And so in the book, we not just do neuroscience, but we also cover everything from psychology to almost philosophy, sociology sometimes, just, the whole human endeavor to understand the brain. What has that been like? What is that journey? And then along the way, answer really important questions everybody has, like, why do we love? Why do we hate? What is consciousness? Is AI going to take over humanity? Questions that we think everyone wants to know the answer to.
Yeah, I think that you have accomplished that. I hope that this becomes possibly a textbook in college, if not even maybe, I don't know if seniors in high school can read at this level. I'm not really sure, but
just to speak on that just for a second, that's one thing we tried to avoid. Was to actually make it come across like a textbook.
Well, it doesn't. Just to let you know. That's why I was hoping it would replace a textbook. Go ahead.
Replace textbooks. I like that.
Yeah. Well, at least tell the story in a way that does not create as many barriers as it's breaking down. I think too often when people address the brain very formally in their books, there's a jargon associated with the brain and understanding biological processes that you feel like, I've got to go through, chapter 1 has got to be all the definitions, right? And we've got to tell you what we're going to tell you and show you these very basic things so that somehow you can use this palette to paint the stories yourself as we tell them in later chapters. Mm-hmm. And we felt that was very important not to do. Mm-hmm. We felt that it was important, what is the best hook that we can come up with that will pull someone into this material without demanding that they march through a bunch of stuff that they really, would not ordinarily be interested in. And that's really the origin point of the questioning. Each of our chapters is not like some grand statement. It's, why do we love? We're curious about that. Let's examine that topic and find out what is known about it and tell you enough about the underlying biology and neuroscience that you can interpret and understand the chapter, but you don't get bogged down in it. That's the major point.
Yeah, it's in book form, but we designed it so that you can pick up and read any chapter in any order that you find interesting. So if you want to start with, what makes us happy, you can start with that. Or if you want to start with, what happens to the brain when you die, if you're inclined to do that, you can do that. And so you can read it out of order or in any order. The idea basically was to make it a good bathroom read.
Oh, yeah, it's almost like a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think the formatting is important for people that are out there that are scared of getting another book about the brain. It reminded me, it's okay. I think I can say it's my opinion, but I read the book, the Pocket Guide to Interpersonal Neurobiology by Dr. Dan Siegel and Associates. And I liked it, but it was really painful to get through. And I kept having to reread things because it was written by a bunch of people with MDs and PhDs, and which you both have. But it was so insightful for me at the time, but I was trying to explain it to people, and they were like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Because like you said, it's like you kind of have to have an idea of neuroscience to even understand the book. And then the best parts of it were actually the pictures, which there's only like 6 pictures in the whole book, because it would broke it down. And so I like that your book here, Out of Your Mind, is broken down into questions, because I think this is what people have questions about. It's like, yeah, I want to know how things work, but I don't have, I'm a parent in some rural state. I don't have time to go to the university and find, get a degree in this and, whatever. And half the time us therapists, we don't even know how the brain works. So I think we need to kind of figure out more than just the basics here. So I admire that, and I want to give the people some examples of just some things that I found interesting. Just in the first chapter, I found it really entertaining of how you were just doing the basics of talking about Wernicke's area and Broca's area of making language, understanding language. And I thought to myself when I was reading this, of course, this is stuff that I learned in college and talked about it somewhat in grad school, but I found myself going, my God, this is just easier to understand. Like, I feel like the textbook I was learning out of back, 20 something years ago, it was like I had to keep memorizing it. I didn't have any mnemonic to memorize which one was which. And then when I read your chapter, the way you explained it of generating language versus decoding, and then you had the pictures, it just all of a sudden I was like, I could take that test again right now. That test that I didn't do so well on. And I feel like it was easier for me to remember things. And I'm a person who I like memorizing things, but I always memorize something if it's weird. If it's weird or strange, or I make a deliberate association. You ever read the book Moonwalking with Einstein?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that book, and it's by Jonathan something. I can't remember his name. Forer. Yeah. But he said it. Yeah. Anyway, he talks about ways to memorize things. And I find that your book is sort of allowing some of those techniques to come through because of the illustrations and because of the brief paragraphs. I don't know, as a scientist, Dwayne, I'm not sure how I've heard this said is that, you can research things, you can study them, you can understand them. Explaining them to someone who isn't in your lab is a very difficult task. And I do find that as a person who reads articles, and then I have clients who don't care about these articles, I'm trying to help them. How do I distill the information down so that it makes sense to them? And not that they couldn't learn it, but that it's relevant and short and concise, because they don't have time to go read the article about sleep. I need to tell them about sleep and how to help them. Right. So I enjoy that. So that's my compliment. But okay, sorry, I got off track.
I think that's one of the unique things about this book, is that it's a collaboration really between someone who has, 30 plus years of experience. He's an expert in the field. He knows neuroscience and psychology like the back of his hand, and someone who has a PhD in something completely different and has been communicating science for a long time, and also is a cartoonist. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about, how can we make these topics relatable and easy to understand for someone who's a truck driver, someone who's a nurse, or someone who, is an engineer who's never really thought or read anything about the brain. And so, I think that's what kind of makes the book unique, is that, it covers a lot. Like, you're going to get out of it basically almost at the level of a textbook, but you're going to have a lot of fun reading it. It's going to be super easy to read. There's going to be cartoons to make you laugh along the way. And also it's going to be very relatable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think part of the way that I think about the book, in terms of the structure of the book, and in terms of your what you walk away with after reading the book, the structure of the book, I think, is really ideal for the sorts of memorization that you're mentioning, Paul, because it is sort of chunked. There are chunks of information that are and rest areas in the comics where, okay, I've taken in this bit of information. Now here's a comic that is that will illuminate that piece of information, and that gives your brain, different parts of your brain, the ability to engage with the information like a good graphic novel. In terms of what you walk away with, it's kind of a GUI, sort of graphical user interface to neuroscience, in that, I would say that my thoughts are not that much more complex in how I think about the brain than what is conveyed in the book. It's just that I can go, because of my experience, to a deeper level of detail than we ask you to do in the book. But I think, in a real sense, if you read this book, then you walk away with this with, maybe at least an undergraduate understanding that we would like to convey about how the brain works. So it's, I think it succeeds on that front.
Yeah, I
And I'm
do.
glad it worked for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's working. I'm gonna keep reading all of it. Really, I'm really enjoying it. But I want to jump into some controversy because people love that in the United States. It's one of our brands, if you would. It's our bestseller. I do feel like we should talk about happiness, but it's kind of like that's the dessert that we'll get to. So I want to take a bite out of something, which is fear. Two questions. Well, the chapter names. Will AI take my job? That's probably a chapter that you'll add to. And yeah, a little bit about memory. Those two chapters were interesting to me. So you can't give a yes or no, but that would be horrible. That'd be a bad book. Will AI take my job? Yes, please close the book.
Well, I think the catchphrase these days is not so much that AI will take your job, but the person who knows how to use AI is the person that's going to take your job.
Much better. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. We can sort of bat this back and forth, but from my perspective, as someone who is still involved in training graduate students, it's very important to me that our students have a firm understanding of both the strengths and limitations of AI. The state of AI these days is that, we have these large language models, and we also have symbolic models of AI. And those sort of neurosymbolic models are thought to be a bit more of a reflection of how the brain works. But those aren't necessarily the ones that are getting the huge amount of investment from companies these days. The large language models aren't. Now, the large language models are essentially very undifferentiated, large numbers of parameters of these neuron-like elements. And so the question that we pose in the chapter, I think, is, well, is that enough? Is the brain simply just a bunch of synapses and neural-like elements that you throw into a vat, and if you give it inputs, it's going to give you outputs that make sense? I think our position in the book is that there are two things that are very important about brains that set them apart from AIs. Number one is that brains evolve. And we actually spend quite a bit of time talking about, hey, these things that we carry around in our heads didn't just appear out of nowhere. They're actually a product of an evolutionary process that was in response to specific things that happened in the environment. We had to go from single-celled organisms to multicellular organisms that needed to move to acquire food and to thrive and to reproduce. And that has an enormous benefit in terms of the structure of the brain and the new parts that had to be added to it. So that's one thing. The other important thing is that brains develop. So when you're born, you're somewhat undifferentiated. Your brain areas are laid out because of evolution, because certain pieces and parts need to be where they are. But there's also a process where you learn about the world, where those internal connections from your eyeball, for example, that go to the thalamus and then up to the cortex, all those things have to be laid in so that your perception of the world around you is very much learned. You know what vertical and horizontal lines are because you're experiencing those as you grow up. You learn how you feel about certain things, and you become conscious because you start to have tastes and empathy and all those good things that come from growing up as a member of a family. And AIs don't have that. AIs must emulate that. So from the standpoint of large language models, we see that as powerful as they are, and they can be very impressive, they're still making mistakes because they haven't really grown up. They've just appeared and people are giving them inputs with the thought that, hey, the more of these things that we provide, the better they're going to be. So the way I think about it is it's like thinking about a large language model, emphasis on the language, and the idea that it's an artificial general intelligence, a sort of Mr. Data type intelligence walking around. is like thinking that you could perfect the temporal lobe, which is specialized to process language, and then create an entire brain from it. So I think the same sort of fallacy is there. And I'm not anti-AI in any sense. I'm just, I do think, though, we need to be truth tellers about AI and not say, hey, this thing is going to solve all of our problems, when it's very good at a very limited set of problems.
Yeah, I think we wrote that chapter in the book, Will an AI Take My Job? Because, like you said, this is becoming a very significant thing in our culture and our history as humans. And so it's a big topic, and we kind of felt that everyone needs to be more informed about what an AI is, how it works, how it's different than the human brain. And so in this chapter, we really kind of step you through, like, well, how does a brain work? What's kind of the basic building block of your brain? And then how was that used to inspire the first AIs? So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but like when people talk about neural networks and language models, these are all things that are really based on the human brain and how the neurons are connected to each other and how these networks adapt to different information. And so that was kind of the inspiration, is to get people to just be able to understand a little bit more about, when you're looking at something generated by AI, what are you really looking at, and how it's different and how not different is it from what like a human brain does.
Yeah. And I mean, just as a curious person, I've played around with different models, and I'm not being paid for this. I currently like Perplexity, but you have to pay for the pro version. But I utilize it to find things. And I don't mean that it's going to put Google out of business, but I'll say the other day I said, I need 10 peer-reviewed articles about the effects of smartphones on sleep. Make sure they're all credible sources from these types of databases. I gave it that prompt, and it gave me 10 peer-reviewed articles. Now, they were on different topics, right? Because it found the word smartphone, sleep, and it found NIH and JAMS, the other medical articles databases, and it found me those articles. Now, were they exactly on what I needed and what I wanted? No, but I found that very useful, because sometimes when I go to Google and I type in smartphone effects on the brain or sleep, I'm getting like Sandy's podcast from Franklin, Tennessee. She says, throw your kid's cell phone in the garbage. And I'm like, wow, no, I want an article, and I don't want to pay for LexisNexis. I don't want to go on there. I'm not a researcher. I'm just trying to find. So I found that useful, right? And things like that. But I could see, and if I said, okay, summarize it, the summary skill in my mind is so generically, like, you can see the programming in it. It's not very creative, but it is pretty good at grouping themes together in the language model. I found that. That's my opinion. Yes. I have no idea. I'm not a computer researcher, but I don't know if that resonates. Versus it didn't like think. It just read and saw things that were similar themes and grouped them and then put them in a pretty well written paragraph.
It sounds like something an undergrad would do.
Yes, exactly. Now, I didn't use that summary. I didn't turn it in. But I mean, I was just, I found the more useful was sending me the citations. That to me was useful. Then I could go read that article myself, make my own conclusion, versus it summarizing. I felt it was not very useful for
making stuff up.
Well,
yeah, it was not useful.
I'll share something that will absolutely date me and age me as being this artifact from another era. But I remember before we had personal computers, back in the 80s, if I wanted to research a topic, I would go to the library. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I'm not that. I'm not that young, but I did used to go to the library when I was in college. But we did have computers. But yeah.
Well, so there was no Google, there was no even Netscape Navigator, nothing. And there would be this set of books in the academic medical library called The Reader's Guide to Academic Literature. And these were blue books that essentially were cross-references of papers that were published that given month. So they would have these blue books, but each book would represent just 1 month of output from the academic literature. And so you'd go to those books, you'd find the cross references with other academic journals of an idea. So you'd search on an idea. Yeah, tell me everything you know about addiction. And so the addiction topic would then map to everything that had been published during that month. And then you would go to the stacks and you would find the actual physical journal, and you would write down, crib out, everything that you could about, okay, here's the basic point from this paper that I need to include in my research or in something I'm working on. So we have come a long way. And the thing that I will remark on is everyone thinks that the newest technology is going to be the death of our ability to think, our ability to reason, our ability to do work the way we're used to doing it. And then there's also the sort of Pollyannish, everything's going to be fine. You don't have to worry about it. This is going to be wonderful, and it will make everyone's lives much better. Both positions are correct, but for different reasons, right? So, just if you think about it, if someone invented the gun, well, the gun's great because it's going to help us go out and hunt food, and it'll provide an easier way for us to put food on the table. But the gun, used a different way, can be very detrimental to society. So I think all of these technologies have two edges to the sword, so to speak. And we just have to be careful on their utilization and what we deploy them on. Putting a lot of our infrastructure, for example, into the hands of an AI, may not be the wisest thing to do until we fully understand how the AIs are working, because they are in essence black boxes. We don't know exactly sometimes how they're coming to a conclusion or an output. So before that happens, do you really want your power grid controlled by them? Do you want, weapon systems controlled by them? Yes, they may be able to respond more quickly, but, in the same way that some LLMs can fabricate or hallucinate false citations, if you're working on a paper, what if they hallucinated that there was an attack and they deployed countermeasures to that attack? So I think we have to be very careful and deliberate and purposeful in what areas we deploy AI. And we always need humans in the loop, I think, at least for now. Maybe someday we have a very trustworthy Mr. Data that has that's very benevolent and has the best intentions for humanity. But right now we're not quite there.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a well put summary. Jorge, do you have any comments on this from your point of view or the chapter?
Yeah, no, I think if you read the chapter, you get a deeper sense of how an AI works and the parallels it has with humans. And I think that will make you a little bit less scared, in the sense that, it's just kind of doing what your brain is doing. And that can be a very good thing. And it can also be sort of a dangerous thing if you don't know what you're doing or if you don't know what it's doing.
Yeah.
Raise your AI well.
Raise your AI well. Yeah, Ted Chiang. I don't know if you've read Ted Chiang's books, but he's got a book, a short story collection, two of them that I've read, and I don't remember which one this is in. I think it might be the first one. They raise an AI character who is in sort of this world of sort of a meta world, and the AI character wants more and more power and more freedom, and then it like gets in this robot body, and then it like lives in the real world, and then it doesn't want to go back to the artificial world. And it kind of tells this spooky story, but he uses a lot of computer science because he's a Microsoft engineer in the story. So it's interesting because it kind of tells like the beauty of it, but then also like the dangers, and then there's of course these books like Snow Crash and I don't like this book, but Demon or whatever got really popular about the AI that took over the power grids and was like, doing this chaos within the systems of the world. And that
there's no shortage of horror stories involving AI.
Oh yeah.
But I think what we need though is and science itself has its own horror stories. Frankenstein is, it's a scientific horror story in many respects. One of the first science fiction novels, really. There's always this element where literature is giving us warnings about, what are the excesses. And so I think with any new technology, we just need to be mindful of what those excesses can be and try to develop as many safeguards as possible to ensure that all of the positive benefits of AI are there, which are innumerable. I mean, things like reading imaging scans and detecting cancers. Those are great applications of AI, and we want to have those. We want someone, we'd like an AI to be able to go through electronic medical records and say, hey, this person is getting too much of this medication. Maybe we want to dial that back a bit. And, we want those kinds of positive uses of AI.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, I mean, I love that you dove into that right in the middle of the book about the brain. And because there, like you said, there's parallels. We talked a little earlier about the chapter on happiness, right? Which is always something people are talking about or debating in the U.S. at least. And you have this Marcus Aurelius quote, which, of course, I dig Marcus Aurelius. To live the good life, be indifferent to what makes no difference, which is, people can pause it on that, think about that, whatever that means to them. But let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the basics of what you were trying to convey in this chapter.
Yeah, I'll start it off by saying that this was I think one of our favorite chapters to write. I think when we've talked about this before, how it really kind of changed even us to write this chapter. A lot of these chapters made us think a lot about deep issues about ourselves, about our own brains. And so I think anyone who reads these chapters, I mean, if it changed us as writers, I think it's going to have a pretty good effect on people who read the chapters. But yeah, we have a whole chapter called What Makes Us Happy. And we sort of go through the history of how people have tried to understand happiness, going all the way back, like you said, to Marcus Aurelius, that through sort of the cognitive therapies and things like Maslow's hierarchy in psychology, and then all the way through to neuroscience and what we know from brain imaging and brain studies.
Yeah, it's all here. And I thought this was interesting. I love this. I've thought about this a while, my whole life, really, since I took an economics course, about the Maslow's hierarchy and the whole idea of this whole time is money thing that economists always say. And time is money, and then money is time. And I was like,
and money can't buy you happiness, but it turns out that's not true.
That's actually could, right? I mean, there's certain things that money can buy you, but I this picture of this guy with all this money, kind of at the top here, trying to figure out his existential what he needs, and then the guy on the ground, spare a dime, spare time, right? Like they're kind of in these opposite places of these extremes. And I think about that. I do think our society, people are often trying to find the balance between the need to survive, the need to have a place to live, the need to have amenities and food, certain types of food or clothing or whatever, and then going all the way up to, of course, luxury items or whatever, or a certain lifestyle, and then what is the trade-off? What's the trade-off? What am I trading for this? Right. And then meanwhile, we have other people that are saying minimalism. That's the answer. I want all the time and less stuff. But then what am I trading off? So I kind of wanted you guys to because this is getting into philosophy, but it's also the science of time, the science of how we think about time, the science of how we think about money and wealth and security. Yeah. Can you kind of give me a few thoughts on what you learned from this chapter?
Yeah, I think, we try to structure the chapter as like, can we come up with a formula for happiness? Is that possible? And I think we kind of do it at the end. And so it turns out that there's several kind of components to this formula that all sort of contribute to your overall happiness. And like you said, money is definitely one of them. Like, people say, oh, money can't buy you happiness. Well, as Dwayne said, it sort of can. Like, people have done studies, and basically the more money you have, the happier people report being in general, on average. But the lesson that came out in the chapter is that more money definitely makes you happier, but money can't solve all of your problems. So there are things that money definitely cannot buy. It can't buy you better relationships with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends. It can't buy you health. It can't buy you, good mental health sometimes. And so basically, you should never say no to more money. Like, if someone offers you money, you should take it, because it'll definitely make you happier. But obviously not at the expense of these other things that make the human brain happy too, which are connections to other people, a general sense of purpose. Physical activity is also very important. We found out for the brain. You might not think it's important for your brain, but it is super important for your happiness. And so it's sort of the combination of things. Even things like simplifying your life can have a huge impact. So sometimes having too many options can make you unhappy. Like, if you're like we talked about in the book, right, Dwayne, about shopping for things on Amazon. Like, sometimes, like, there's so many options on Amazon for like paper clips, or
even a toothbrush.
That you can go down that rabbit hole, and it'll also make you like self-doubt your choices and things like that. So thinking about your life strategy is also just kind of simplifying things, keeping your options low, can all contribute to your happiness.
Yeah, the simplification that kind of stuck out to me. And then also I don't want to steal your formula, but I guess the model that you...
Yeah, go for it.
The positive emotions, right? Engagements and things that you have to read the chapter, but engagement and things that you're getting into the flow, relationships, obviously, meaning, you have to have meaning, and accomplishment. I actually even feel like simple goals, right? It's just like little things. Like, it's so, as a therapist, I had a physical therapist once say to me, motion is lotion, to your joints, unless you have something broken or a nerve damage, right? But getting going again can and moving your body just improves that. A lot of issues with, people that have had physical difficulties, especially with a sedentary lifestyle. And so I think about that with psychology too, is like, how do you balance the need for motion and momentum and relationship and flow and engagement in things with the American addiction to too much stimulation? So we have to get, I guess mindfulness, going back to the first part of the book on mindful introduction, is, and then having time to mindfully or to intentionally rest. And so a lot of what I was kind of looking at in the book here is about the intentionality or the forethought into some of these things, and to kind of reflect. Yes. I think you said it. I can't remember what chapter you said. You said something like reflection is essential, or like a reevaluation is essential. You wrote that somewhere.
Yes. Well,
thoughts on that?
What I would offer for that is that, a formula is only as good as your ability to mix the ingredients and to actually engage with it. And there are so many people that have difficulty getting started. And I think that's an important component of this. So, yeah, we have kind of a nice formula for happiness. And honestly, there are things there that I employ in my own life. But you have to also just allow that there are people that really struggle. And they could be struggling not just because they don't understand these things, but they have a true biological difference with those of us who can take a formula like this and run with it. And so we don't want to be too dismissive and say, well, if you follow these steps, you're going to be happy. That's not necessarily the case, because there can be a situation where, you're struggling with a mental health issue. You certainly need to get professional help for that. Sometimes it may involve medication as well as advanced therapies like cognitive behavioral therapies in order to feel better and get well.
Yeah, I think, that kind of ties into one of the overall goals we had with the book, which was to get people to realize that, everything you are and everything humans are, it feels magical, but it's really not magical. I mean, there's sort of a science behind it, and there's an organ that behind it that gives rise to all of these experiences that we have as humans. And so if like you're feeling unhappy or you're feeling a certain hate or some certain emotions, or you're feeling good or bad, it all has sort of roots in your brain and circuits that are happening in there, and chemicals and chemical transmitters. And so in a way that kind of frees you from feeling like it's something magical and something you can't change, to maybe feeling like, oh, this is like this machine I have inside of my head. Something's not going right. Something's not, it's not doing what I think it should be doing. How can I kind of troubleshoot the engine in my in my head in my car to make it work better, and then you can start making connection between, this relationship is not making my brain happy, or this habit that I have is not making my brain, it is making my brain happy, or it's not making my brain happy, so how can I lean into that or not lean into that, kind of give people really a more objective view of their brain, so that they can take better care of it.
I would add to that, Jorge, that and I haven't said this about the book before, but I consider the book to be a kind book. Not only in that it causes us reflection about our own brains, but I'm hopeful that as people read the chapters of this book and they understand things like happiness and love, it helps us to be kinder to each other. One of the things about mental health is that, if you have a broken leg, you have a cast on it, and people can see that, and they can react to it. They can hold the door for you, and they can exercise kindness toward you because you have an outward sign that something's going on. The brain's not like that. If you have a mental disorder, or if you're struggling with depression, that doesn't always necessarily show on the outside. And so part of this, I think, is, can we get a deeper understanding of our own brain, but also understand that these things are going on in other people's minds as well? And in so doing, can we exercise just a little bit of extra kindness and empathy toward others so that we can arrive at a place where we have a better society? So I haven't really said that about the book before in terms of motivation, but I really feel like that's part of what I was feeling when I was working on it.
Yeah. I think that we build a lot of empathy in the book. Is maybe what you're trying to say, and with the goal of helping us not just understand our own brains, but other people's brains as well, right?
Yeah, I do think, and that's why I do feel like this is an important book, because I'm liking everything you both said, because one of the biggest challenges as a practitioner is that somebody finds a narrow definition of what's wrong with them based on, I don't know, ChatGPT, or some blog they read, or something their parents said, or somebody at work said, and they kind of get really narrow about what the problem is. And thus and obviously stress can cause us to be less creative, and trauma can even cause us to be less creative. And so then it's really difficult to even brainstorm solutions when you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of the psychoeducation that's what we call it, which sounds really crazy if you think about it out of context, but a lot of the education that people need, it gives you empowerment. It gives you a sense of agency, that there are many different ways to address this organ in our brain or our head that goes, throughout our body and the nervous system. There are so many different approaches, and perhaps maybe you just haven't found the approach that works to help you. Right? I mean, certain people swear by cognitive behavioral therapy. Other people swear by exercise science. Other people swear by EMDR therapy. And other people, say that they, just quit their job and they, and found a way to survive on less money, and that, or divorce someone. So, I mean, there's not one way, but you have to find out what the cause of the malady is. And it's hard to find out what the cause of the malady is if you don't have, well, a lot of things, but education about the brain is so important because then you can be self-reflective. Is this what's causing it? Or is it something else? Or is it a combination? Like I always say to certain people I work with, I say, we have to think about the situation you're in as a giant pie. And you don't like this pie, but let's break it into segments. This segment is affecting this. This segment is affecting this segment. And which slice do we work on first? And which slice do you think connects to the other slices more for you? And as we say, and I can't remember who said this, but a lot of therapists say this, it's basically like, you have to believe the person's story, how they see it first, before you can gain access to be able to give influence. Right. So if somebody comes in and says, this is what's wrong with me, there's demons on my back, which happens, we can't say, you believe in demons? Get out of my office. This is wrong. No, we have to say, okay, well, tell me about the demons on your back and how is that affecting you? And then eventually it turns into, maybe this is some sort of psychological trauma, maybe some sort of hallucination, maybe it's a metaphor, but with the book, having all these different chapters on love and hate and what is consciousness, free will, memory, addiction, like you're covering a lot of the major human questions that we have. And I do think this is why I do a podcast. I mean, why I have 150 plus episodes is because I think knowledge is power and it empowers people to dig in deeper, because there's always, not always, but I think obviously you both have had long careers. I always think we find more things as we dig in science, and there's new brain research coming out next week that might even find more colorful answers for some of this stuff. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the brain is famously the most complicated arrangement of matter known to man, and it's kind of an open question whether we'll ever understand it fully. Can a brain really understand everything that's happening in a brain? But I think one of the main points of the book is that we have science, fortunately, to help us break down our brains, and it's kind of the best tool that we have. And the more people are informed about the science of the brain, what we understand and how it kind of works, the more they can, like you said, kind of self-reflect and help break down what are those specific things in people's lives that are making them happier or frustrating them, or maybe the opposite. What are the things that are making you happier? Yeah. Go ahead, Dwayne. You were going to say.
I agree with that. I think better understanding of the brain has so many dividends for human life and understanding of our behaviors. It has dividends in terms of, these new technologies like AI wouldn't exist if we didn't have some, model of how brain cells work. So even, these kinds of technologies that will change our future, they're all derived in some sense from a better understanding of how the brain works. And I think the other thing that we mentioned, I think even in the preface of the book, is that we live in an environment these days with social media where there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of distrust of people like me. I mean, I'll just be blunt about it. People maybe don't trust scientists the way they did. And part of that is, we're not telling our story. We're not telling the story of the brain. We're not telling not just, these factoids and feeding you all of these neat and interesting facts about the brain. We're not going a little bit further and a little deeper in telling you how we know these things so that you can have trust and confidence that what we're telling you is actually a ground truth.
Oh, I like that, because I do think we're in our country facing a crisis of distrust of expertise. And part of that, I think, this is just a theory, comes from the emotional component of the way certain experts have been portrayed, obviously, maybe unfairly, but also sometimes how experts have come across to the public. And so I think a book like this, of making, learning fun, empowering people to learn and to take this information, and also, like you said, how we got to these conclusions, right? And talking about the scientific method and the way that we've come to conclusions that are still being concluded. Obviously, we're not at the conclusion, but we came to this conclusion, which is a sub point on the road of research that continues. Is key to kind of re-establishing a partnership, if you will, and trust with the public. And I think, and especially in the medical profession, I don't know, I'm sure your profession is being attacked, but the medical profession is in much disarray due to large figures within that kind of attacking each other, and then people that have no medical degrees that say you should drink raw milk and put your baby in it, and then that will help you with your cancer or something.
Well,
anyway,
the way I think about that, and I think part of the answer to that is for us not to focus so much on personalities and people, and focus more on the questions and the data.
Yes,
so there should be things that we can agree on as, smart human beings. If we look at these things and they come out a certain way, we should be able to get behind the consensus on them. And we should be able to contextualize the sort of outliers. And I think as a society need to not put faith in scientists, not even put faith in me, but put faith in the process of science and the process of asking questions and refinement of hypotheses and going at a question with new information and a better approach. That, I think, is something that's worthy of our faith, not a specific person, because people are flawed. We all know that. People make mistakes. During the period of COVID, people said things that maybe they shouldn't have said. Maybe they represented things in an effort to try to simplify things that perhaps they went too far. But that doesn't mean they're evil people. It means that they made a mistake. And so if we can back off of that and just say, well, what's really important here? We have people who are dedicated to making our lives healthier and to making people happy and to ensure that they live as long as they can live, as healthy as they can possibly be. Let's pay attention to that and not get hung up so much on the politics of things. Because I think science is one of those things that historically has been very much supported by everyone, whether you're from a red state or a blue state. And I look very much forward to the time when we can get back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm hoping that we're headed there at some point, because I think that will be helpful for everybody, especially like you said, the intentions of doctors is do no harm. The intentions of scientists are to learn and to look into the questions and to find solutions or answers or partial answers, right? And there's been, if we just take a quick brief look at history, which we don't have time on this podcast, all these wonderful medical and scientific advancements that have made our lives better, and also that is mostly thanks to science and even accidental discoveries in labs that have occurred. So I appreciate your work, and I appreciate that you put it in this book. And so I'm hoping that we have a very good response. And so far, some of the readers of the book on the back, I was actually seeing here, Dr. Alan Lightman. I like that guy. I have interviewed him before, and he's quite prolific. He loves this book, and he calls it a fun-filled trip with clear and easy-to-read explanations, humor and wit, entertaining illustrations, and a good storytelling to boot. He's a very good wordsmith, and I agree completely. So I
think that's the best thing he's ever written. That book.
I love it.
What I will say about that is I am so grateful that so many people that I had heard of were willing to take a look at this book and felt so positive about it that they would comment positively on it. That really hit the sweet spot with me. People whose books I had read and had enjoyed something that we had generated, and so much so that they were willing to say a few words on behalf of it. So that was very helpful. It's well reviewed also on Goodreads and Amazon. And I think right now it's on sale on Amazon. So
okay, there you
helps
go.
too.
That's always
and
a good one.
the hardcover edition is something like 40% off. So it's a good time to buy it.
Wow. Okay. That's, for all those folks who are out here listening to the interview today, this is let's hop to it, or jump into your local bookstore or library and order it. And as it is on Pantheon, an imprint of Penguin Random House, it should be available everywhere books are sold.
Yeah.
So
in multiple languages too.
Oh, okay. Where have you got it going so far? Just curious. Where's it going out?
We just saw the Vietnam cover.
Yeah. I think it's up to like 10 languages, right, Dwayne?
Okay. Something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's really good. That means I think the demand is there. So I'm excited for this one. So yeah, I'm just going to say to my audience, this is a buy. That's what I don't ever say not buy at the end of the show, but I can. I delete those interviews.
there are a lot of one.
Paul, what's the book called again? Sorry.
Oh, your book is called Out of Your Mind: The Biggest Mysteries of the Human Brain.
Oh, great. Thank you.
There are many wonderful books about the brain out there, and you should read all of them.
Yeah.
And you'll learn something unique and new from each one of them. That's the great thing about having different people, attack the same materials. Like, Superman came out. So James Gunn's take on Superman is very different than the Snyder cut, right? So, you can think of it that way, that, we're sort of riffing on material that maybe you've encountered in other places before, but hopefully with a different tone and different take-homes.
Yeah. Or if you're only going to read one book about the brain, honestly, we recommend this one just because we did put a lot of effort into making it a really good introduction for someone who's never read a brain book before.
Yeah, I think
that's true.
I think it's a good starter. And to be honest, the comic appeal, I mean, let's be real. Once you start reading one comic, it's really hard to stop reading comics. It's really hard to quit. Like Spider-Man, okay? And then have you ever heard of The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Ham?
Yeah.
Peter Porker, okay?
Peter Porker.
And then we've got the other Spider-Man, just Spider-Man, and they're all different and they're all fun. And now we have, of course, I don't know, a dozen movies. But I think it's the same idea. It's a brain book, but it's done with the comic book theme. Okay.
A great book for book clubs. I actually spoke to a book club who had read her book, and that was a lot of fun because they came very prepared with a lot of questions. And I think it's also a good book to share with members of your family. So if you're on a road trip, it's a great book to hand to your kid to keep them busy, and then you can talk about some of the big ideas that are in that book. So,
or all you teenagers who listen, call out your parents. Bring this on a road trip and just start reading it and be like, hey, you guys are doing this. Anyway, sorry, Jorge, cut you off.
Or the audiobook. Dwayne and I narrated the audiobook.
Oh, did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay. I love that one. The
hours. It was. I don't know about you. It was like 7 hours I was reading.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's not like a light book. It's like 360 pages. I mean, you're getting a lot for your money there.
That's true.
Yeah. A lot of it is cartoons. So
yeah. Well, right. But, as I said, like when you read one comic, it's hard to stop reading. You're addicted to comics at that point. At least I was. Maybe I have a comic addiction, but I love comics. So, guys, huge fan. And I am excited to see where it goes. And I hope that all of the rest of your interviews or tour, if you will, goes well. I'm excited for book 2.
Awesome.
I don't know what you're going to do next, but I just put it out there that there could be another book. I don't know what, but part
into
2.
Your mind. Your mind.
Into it. Yeah, instead of out of your mind.
Or all in your head. That's my working title.
If you could do, you know what? You can take this and run with it. If you could do a book on couples and what happens to couples' brains, so take all that research and make it into this format, you would be in mansions on the coasts, because there's a lot of good relationship books out there, but I don't think anyone has fully gone into the brain science of why those emotions come out. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Wow.
Oh.
Demand.
Cool.
That's what I hear. It's what I'm hearing in the community. So anyway, But no pressure, no pressure. All right. Well, anyway, good to see you guys, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. We're really grateful for having this time with you and your audience.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.